to Omega. Kev, thank you so much for setting me up to succeed. As tough as it is to follow something as beautiful as that, it does. Music does something, art does something, poetry speaks to us in a way that mentalizing can't always do. I found myself this week leaning into poetry a little bit, leaning into non-mental beauty. And so I'm especially grateful for that non-mental beauty that you contribute, both of you contribute this morning. Good morning, and good morning, everyone. On Wednesday of this last week, I shared with the group a piece that I think I'm gonna start with today. It's a piece written by Albert Camus, who's a philosopher in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. I hope I got that right. I think I did. I invite you to take a breath and surrender to the chair and let it hold you as we breathe in his beauty, his non-mental beauty. In the midst of hate, he writes, I found that there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found that there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. In the midst of winter, I found that there was within me an invincible summer. And that makes me happy, he writes, for it reminds me that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me there is something stronger, something better, pushing right back. It's been helpful, that piece. This week, it's kind of accompanied me as I began to consider our theme for September, facing the feelings. I notice that the author says, in the midst of all of this, there is that which is invincible, not in spite of, not when things aren't rough only, aren't challenging only. No, he says, in the midst of hate, I found an invincible love. I think it's an important point. Feelings can be and are all of that. Laughter and tears and chaos and calm and messy and confusing and wonderful and delightful and breathtaking. I recognize the irony too this morning of mentalizing something that is so inherently non-mental, feelings. We mentalize them in order to talk about them in conversations like we have this morning. We take this exquisite non-mental land of feeling and sensing and subtle divinity, and we suck it right up our necks and try to cram it into words. It complicates things. It complicates things too when one is raised in an environment where feelings were not taught, not spoken to or explained, certainly not honored. That seems to be the case with a lot of us, with a lot of folks. My early teachers, I have come to believe, to realize that they intentionally or unintentionally withheld things from me. They positioned things, in this case, as primary, as feelings, as essentially undesirable. And so when feelings would come up, I couldn't talk to my parents about them. I really didn't have anyone else to ask, and so I just went with what I was taught. Feelings are undesirable. She's just emotional, I would hear sometimes, or when my feelings were showing up. I was very sensitive. Therefore, what I learned with that kind of judgment was basically avoidance. I was allowed and encouraged to think my way out of a tight spot, apply my intellect, score well in school, another place that didn't teach feelings well, didn't teach the navigation of feelings well. But hopefully we get to a point somewhere along the way when we realize that to try to live avoiding our feelings is to try to live a life that is grossly incomplete. Feelings have always been and will always be, they're integral, they're critical facets of the human experience. If I feel bad or sad or afraid, there's a message there for me. If I felt joyful or well or celebratory, there is a message there for me. There is always a message. That's what feelings are, messengers. And then there is this, one of my favorite reminders from our founder, Dr. Holmes. He writes, God speaks to the heart in a language of feeling. God speaks to the heart in a language of feeling. If I desire to cultivate and nourish and expand my relationship with the divine, I need to learn that language. If I'm not willing to do that, to bother with that, well, I guess I could read another book, but that won't come close to a personal experience, your personal experience of the divine. So let's bring this all into today. What I have observed, and more so this year because of all that's going on in the world, is that we're experiencing feelings in a bigger way than we might normally. I know I am. And not all bad, I have befriended a cat. So I don't want to limit this conversation to one side of the feelings coin only, but to consider both joy and awe and wonder and loving kindness have not gone anywhere, and there is no shortage of them. And yet we're feeling the whole spectrum of feelings. My question for you today is, how are you doing in navigating your feelings in this season of your life? And considering the possibility that your feelings are messengers, what might be the current message? What is the voice of God whispering to you today? And here's another valid question. I was asked this this last week. Considering the possibility that your feelings are messengers, what if the voice of God is making us aware of false beliefs that we're still carrying around, false beliefs or lapses or inconsistencies or just plain untruths? Because here's the thing, my mind will engage based on how a belief makes me feel, whether or not that belief is true. All I have to do is believe it's true. I've proved that to myself enough times. Anyone ever make any decision or take any action based on feelings stemming from a belief that is not true? Oh, I know. Me too. I ordered a book this last week that I stumbled across. It's called Lies My Teacher Told Me: Everything Your American History Textbook Got Wrong. We make our choices and decisions. We form our worldview, how we look at and interact with our world based on what we're taught about the way things work. And we're taught by our parents and clergy and school teachers, administrators, policymakers, and yes, politicians whom we have hired and appointed to educate our children. And I'm continuing to realize more lately how much I was not taught did not learn. Race relations in our country is a good example of that, and not the only example. And honestly, the more I realize how slanted history has been taught, the more upset I become. The selective way of teaching history perpetuates feelings based on false or incomplete beliefs. The selective way of teaching history perpetuates feelings based on false or incomplete beliefs. History is written by the victor. In every case, think about it. Those who are repressed, those who lose a war or whatever kind of conflict, are not in a position to document what happened. That's not the way history seems to work. The losers are just trying to survive. Up until now, maybe now we're in the midst of a historical global shift as we look at lots of sides. We're beginning to learn how to look at lots of sides of an issue. Someone asked me the other day, this last week, they said, if God is good, why has it taken 400 years to get around to having the conversations that we're having today? And I had to sit with that for a little bit. The response came later after the conversation had concluded. It showed up in my mind and heart, and the response was, ask the Jews. Certainly among the most persecuted of peoples. I realized somewhere along the way that God does not act on a human time frame. This, in large part, is where faith comes in. Do I believe underneath it all that God is good, that I live in a loving universe, and that the arc of life bends inexorably towards love, towards balance, towards good? If you do not have the faith in a loving God and a loving universe, I submit to you that you are the victim of the same kind of inaccurate teaching and learning that we find in our history books. I submit to you that you have been misled, deceived, intentionally or unintentionally lied to. I don't know about you, but when I realized that this is what has been and continues to be taught, I was not at all happy. I was pretty upset, truth be told. I don't particularly care for being lied to and being used, and I feel like that's what's happened. Come to find out, it's happened in a lot of ways, covering a lot of ground. And if not, I'm not mistaken, based on what little I know, and I need to learn more, and I am learning more, but if I'm not mistaken, largely we've been educated for the purpose of enriching and empowering some while disempowering others. And that's simply not in alignment with what we teach, what we know to be the nature of creation, that all are created equal, and all that goes along with that. And so it's up to us then, both together and individually, to re-educate ourselves. Now we begin to practice self-empowerment. Also what this philosophy is all about, through self-examination, self-study, self-love. Facing the feelings. Our theme this month, and if my observations are even close, we've been feeling a whole bunch of stuff in a whole bunch of big waves of feeling. And just like waves in the sea, there's an unlimited number of waves, shapes, and sizes and intensities that waves, feelings and emotions meet us and inform us. I wish I was told all of this as a child, but I was taught something different. And I am here to tell you, to set the record straight. Feelings are natural, normal aspects of the human experience. Feelings and emotions are the intelligence of the universe embodied. Feelings and emotions are the intelligence of the universe embodied. They are one aspect, and a significant one, of our relationship with the divinity within us. God speaks to the heart in a language of feeling. It's not lovely. And if we have a relationship with our own feelings that is less than what we might want it to be, then the next step becomes very clear very quickly, and that is to do our own work in our relationship with our own feelings. What are you trying to tell me? And we can ask. We can ask. If we don't, then we're in danger of misinterpreting our own feelings. And since God speaks to the heart in a language of feelings, and my heart and soul desire is an intimate relationship with God, I must learn the language. I'll give you an example. You know the feeling that you can get right down in our bellies when we're faced with something new or unknown or challenging, big in some way, and we feel maybe trepidation, defined as a feeling of fear or agitation about something that may happen. Anyone ever felt trepidation? Mm-hmm. Fear or agitation about something that may happen. I identified that feeling in my belly as fear for many years, decades really. And I acted accordingly. The action that followed the feeling for me was to identify and eliminate the threat so that I could feel safe and carry on relatively unscathed. You see, it's a common default. We feel fear, we seek safety. It's how we're wired. It's one of the reasons why we're still here tens of thousands of years later. But what if? What if I have mistakenly identified what's going on? What if I have mistakenly identified a feeling inside of me? Somewhere along the way, I recognized that possibility. A teacher invited me to think about how fear feels in my belly. Just the feeling, not all I attached to the feeling, not the story. And I immediately discovered that fear in my belly feels almost identical to how excitement feels in my belly. Almost identical. So what if I've been misidentifying excitement and calling it fear and letting that definition, letting the ensuing feelings guide me and inform me about how to act accordingly? What if I have kept at arm's length in my life? Good. But have I kept at arm's length in my life, believing that I was fearful when what I might have been many of those times was excited? Of course, then the realization is that I'm going to show up very differently in the excitement than I'm going to show up in my fear. Totally different, yes. How would I have navigated differently, chosen differently? How many no's might have been yeses? Feelings are messengers. But growing up as a young male child in my generation, feelings were not discussed. I think my parents, and for that matter, their parents before them, didn't know how. They didn't have the kind of relationships with their feelings that we're recognizing today as critical, good and healthy and necessary in order for us to live rounded, balanced, complete lives. I have been dancing with this, seriously dancing with this feelings all year as they have intensified, okay, maybe 2 years, really, since I was diagnosed January of last year with cancer. I will guarantee you that something like that will invite an experience of feelings, and lots of them, volume-wise, and lots of them diversity-wise. Feelings across the spectrum, that's the human experience. And I wouldn't have it any other way, but only because I now have a relationship with my feelings. It's not always neat or immaculate still. It can be quite messy, but it's better at least than it's ever been. I can do that, not immaculately maybe, but better. There was a time when I would have had it any other way. This kind of feeling and intensity, all of the things that waves to be avoided, or the ones that catch you off guard, knock you off balance, leave you befuddled, and sometimes just land you right on your head. But then there's Dr. Holmes, who reminds me that nothing is real to us unless we make it real. Nothing can touch us unless we let it touch us. Refuse to have the feelings hurt. Refuse to receive anyone's condemnation. In the independence of your own mentality, believe and feel that you are wonderful. This is not conceit. This is just truth. And so we come back to the truth of who and what we are as we navigate this most peculiar of years, this most thrilling and exciting and terrifying and exhausting and wonderful of times. There's a healing going on. There is good that is emerging, that has been long planted, and it's time for it now to grow. Truth. It's now time for it to grow. And we're in the midst of it, and we're doing okay. And it helps me to remember, this is the other thing I'm going to share with you this morning, more poetry, because it just speaks to me sometimes in ways that nothing else can. I'm going to close with this, so I invite you to take a breath and surrender to the wisdom, this time of Khalil Gibran, who writes this. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled, from the peaks of the mountains to long winding road crossing forests and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nothing can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear. Because that's when the river will know. It's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. Blessed be, may this be a season of us all becoming the ocean, or recognizing the fact that that's the truth of who and what we are. We are already that. And so it is from that place that I lean easily and naturally into prayer this morning. And remember and recognize that there is one life, there is one Genesis, from which all things flow, within which all things exist. And there is a nature to that one thing, that is to live, to love, to express itself, to grow, to expand, to become more self-aware, to celebrate itself, to love itself, to recognize itself and lift itself up in the human experience. And God only knows in how many other iterations life celebrates itself, perhaps an infinite number. And so it is from that place that I speak this word this morning, this word of gratitude and of blessing. So grateful to be in such good company, grateful to be able to have conversations like this, to be reminded that within me there is something greater than any circumstance, any situation. There is something in me that knows and knows that it knows. There is something in me, as Dr. Holmes reminded us this morning. There is a presence and a power greater than I am that nurtures and supports me in ways I could not even imagine. I know that's the truth of who and what I am as an embodiment of spirit. I know that's the truth for each person here this morning and within the sound of my voice. Each of us have answered the invitation. Each of us has said yes to the call of life itself, to be a place where the good of God shows up in the world. I am that. You are that. We are that. And so I bless all of those that are in service to contributing to a world that works for everyone. I bless the children. I bless the sages who have seen and survived so much and now have so much to give, so much to teach, so much to remind us that we have perhaps forgotten. I open to all the guidance and the wisdom that's needed and necessary during this time. I open to awe and wonder and love and kindness and good of 1,000 different kinds. I open to joy, the invincible smile, an invincible calm, an invincible summer. I open to it all for myself and anyone who chooses it as their own. They haven't gone anywhere, these things, these aspects of God. And this week I claim that they well up within us in unlimited surprise, that they surprise and delight us at every turn, that we find good in expected and unexpected ways. And this week reminds us that God is good and that we're a place where that good shows up. And so for all of that, I give thanks and release this, my word of prayer, into a law of mind that says yes, and into the heart of God, where it has always been the truth and will always be so. I give thanks and simply let it be. And we anchor that together by saying, and so it is.